I have been a CRA member since 1980 in Sonoma County, a tough place to be a CRA member. But I am honored to be part of the CRA because of everything you just heard. And Carl is an excellent president. I'm also giving Carl the hook for me. He can tell me you're done anytime he wants, because he's got a good sense of judgment. And I am going to tell you some things today that are not meant to offend. But they might. And that's a good thing. I'm going to say some things that you may say, that's impossible. But it's true. The truth, in fact, has been hidden from you by your culture. And one thing I really like about Donald Trump is Donald Trump is the first president of the United States to say what I found out the hard way. When I started doing this in 1985 is when I started representing the right to life. Your media that is supposed to be informing you is lying. They are liars. They lied long before Donald Trump even came around. He found out the hard way. He thought they would just cover the facts. And he saw that they were lying. So that's the first thing you need to know. The second thing you need to know is that you and I include myself, have been very poorly educated as Americans. It's just how it is. Even if you did not go to a government school, a unionized government school, American education is notorious. Tom and I, if you don't know Tom Hudson, you should know Tom Hudson. One of the backbones of CRA and former president of CRA. Tom has studied abroad. I've studied some abroad. I have family abroad. And I'll just give you an example. On our honeymoon, I have family in Ireland. I ended up becoming a teacher, an English teacher. When I was in Ireland, we stayed with relatives. And one of my cousins was in 5th grade, what was equal to 5th grade. So what are you studying? Well, he was memorizing a Shakespearean soliloquy in 5th grade.
Wow. Yeah.
Do American school kids do that? I know English majors that don't know Shakespeare at all, much less a soliloquy. You have been poorly educated. Don't think that you know everything. That's my fault. I have suffered under American education. And I don't have time to get into it. And if you know who John Dewey was, probably the single greatest influencer of American education in the 20th century and destroyed it. And we're living in the flotsam and jetsam of that education system. And you're seeing that now. So understand, I'm going to tell you some things, and you'll say, well, that can't be. But you've been lied to, and you've been miseducated. And again, me too. So everything I'm telling you, I'm as guilty of. I want to hit 3 things. The topic today is the economics of the culture of death. And I like people that are taking notes, thank you, because I want you to check what I tell you. Because I'm going to tell you things you haven't heard because you've been lied to. The first thing I'm going to tell you is you don't know or understand what Roe v. Wade really did. The media has a version of what Roe v. Wade was about. The feminist movement has a version, but they're not telling the truth. Anyone who's read Roe versus Wade knows that it doesn't make sense. But most people don't know this. There was actually 2 abortion decisions that day, January 22nd, 1973. regarding two different states. And I'll go into those briefly in a little bit. But I want you to know that even if you're animatedly pro-life, you have not been told the real truths and the full-orbed implications of Roe v. Wade. And the Dobbs decision does not direct itself to the real hell that Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton, they're companion decisions, and everybody refers to it as the Roe regime. But it's not understood. Hopefully when you leave this room, you will understand it a little bit better, and you will dig into it a little bit better. My second point, and this is related to the topic, is the economics of the culture of death. My second point is the practice of medicine has been inverted. The practice of medicine has been, here's a big word, but it's a fun word. It's been transmogrified. You know what that means? Have you heard it? Calvin and Hobbes uses it. If it wasn't for Calvin and Hobbes, I wouldn't know a lot of words. So, I used to teach Latin. But transmogrified, and it means changed into a monster. This is so significant, but you need to understand the practice of medicine is not, it's not just that it's not doing what it should do. It's doing the inverse. Medicine is intentionally killing people. If you don't understand that, you're not paying attention. You're listening to what you're being told, but you're not paying attention to the real truths of what's happening. You're being misled. You have been misled. I don't mean to offend you, but I will, because we were talking earlier, Jerry and I were talking earlier, in order to get someone's attention, sometimes they might get offended. And a lot of you know this man. Jesus was willing to offend people. The leaders of his culture, the religious leaders, he was willing to offend them in the hope that they'd come to their senses. So again, I want to thank you folks who are taking notes. I want to remind you a very important principle, again, from the scriptures. But he that is wise for himself. So don't take my word for it when I'm telling you these things. And those of you who take notes, again, I think that's a high compliment to me. I'm honored when people take notes. And if you're listening, anybody who's listening or viewing this, please check what I'm saying. Double check. Don't believe me because I'm saying it. I'm only honored to say what's right. And it stands whether I live or die. What's true is true. It isn't about me. And that's what we need to understand. This isn't about us. We must stand for what's true and right and just. And that's what America's built on. And if people don't do that, we're going to lose everything. So, my third point, and again, this is about the economics. Let me mention her. If you know, those taking notes, if some of you may know her, she was part of, Bill Cardoza isn't here, but Bill would know her. Jacqueline Kaysen, Dr. Jacqueline Kaysen from Humboldt State University, was an economist, and she wrote about the overpopulation myth. We're going to talk economics, and when we have our next speaker, she'll go into economics in detail. But economics literally is the law of the house, the ecos. It's about how humanity lives. And the fact is, there is no overpopulation. If you examine the facts, and again, I'm not here to talk about that. You'll hear more about that in economics. Real economics is fascinating because it's about how human beings get along and how they prosper. And you already know this, that how you live your life and how you conduct your society determines how prosperous you'll be. And the number of people, obviously China has a lot of people. Anybody who studied Marxism knows Marxism is not an economic principle. It doesn't work economically. You should read, if you haven't, again, please study the writings of Thomas Sowell, a former Marxist. He knows Marxism, and he's an economist now at Stanford. He's concise and to the point. Marxism is not an economic theory. And I studied cultural anthropology. It is a cultural anthropology theory. It is a sociology theory. So, that's Dr. Jacqueline Case, and she goes into that. She goes into detail of the economics. And then finally, I want to remind you, as I look at this room now, I was appointed by Kurt Pringle. I was honored by Kurt Pringle. I was appointed a commissioner on aging here in the state of California. That opened my eyes, and I was also appointed the board examiners of nursing homes in California. You need to know, people are routinely being killed in California. Against their will. They're not requesting suicide. They're being killed by the medical profession. They're too costly. We need that bed. This is routine now. And if you have loved ones in a nursing home, you better visit every day. You better let them know that you're watching. You have to communicate and ask about the medicine. If you're not doing that, you don't love your loved ones. I am dead serious. Don't think the state is going to care. Don't think that nursing home is going to care. And I don't have time, but Carl can give a personal. Carl was recently in the hospital. I won't tell his story. But he told me his story of his bedmate in a regular hospital. And what was going to happen to that bedmate. And thankfully, and Carl witnessed this. Again, this seems tangential. It has to do with you. You're part of the silver tsunami. We are going through a cultural change now because we kill babies. This is not just the first time in American history. It's the first time in civilization's history that we have a segment of the population that's over 50, and it's growing. And those who are under 50 don't give a whit about those people. Because culturally, they do believe what the schools have taught them. They're very well educated. I went to university. So I know about we're overpopulated. It's going to help. If they can just leave the planet, it's going to make it better. You already know this is being taught. So, these are important principles. Very quickly, and again, I'm going to leave time later because I know how these meetings go. If you want to ask questions later, I'll be glad to answer them. Roe v. Wade is actually a prolepsis. Have you heard of a prolepsis? From rhetoric, it's a Greek word. Prolepsis means what's said beforehand. And that's usually meant to distract you from what is then said as a conclusion. It's typically used by defense lawyers. You need to know that Justice Blackmun was a defense lawyer. That's what he did for doctors. And essentially, Roe v. Wade is just a big story that goes round and round. It talks about pregnancy, talks about overpopulation. Any myth you want, he just throws junk out there. It doesn't make sense. Even pro-abortion advocates say, Roe v. Wade, it doesn't even make sense. The reason is it's a prolepsis. It's justification for the crime he's about to commit. Doe versus Bolton, he cuts to the point. Doe is the law. It had to do with the laws of Georgia. It required that before an abortion, a doctor had to have a panel of doctors agree, hey, this is appropriate, let's do the abortion. He had to strike that. And basically what he said is, if you have an MD behind your name, you can kill a human being. You can violate the Hippocratic Oath. He explicitly denigrated the Hippocratic Oath. But ironically, he said this. He said, we're going to do this. We're now going to have abortion in every state, even though all the states have laws against abortion. Even California, New York, Massachusetts, they have liberalized their laws. But what he did is he said, doctors will do the abortion. Doctors must abandon the Hippocratic Oath. This is in Doe v. Bolton. Doctors are free to do as they determine. 50 years ago, that was said by the United States Supreme Court. And doctors were told, don't follow the Hippocratic Oath. You're smart. You've got that degree. You can do what you think. Don't be surprised at what's going on with doctors right now. The entire medical profession has been transmogrified. I'm going to have to wrap. That's how little time we have. But I will leave. I'm going to let Carl determine where we go with questions. There is so much here that once you understand it, I've got a couple of copies of the book, Evil Twins. This specifically explains the confusion. It was intended to confuse you. Roe v. Wade. And I know lots of good Christian pro-life people say, oh, Roe v. Wade, it's so ridiculous. Have you read it? It's ridiculous. And they love to debate Roe v. Wade. And they've never read Doe v. Bolton. Debating Roe v. Wade, to be perfectly honest, it is meant to distract you, which is what your opponent, understand this. Your opponents want to make the rules of the debate. They want to chalk the field. This is the topic. Okay, come and debate me now that I've made the rules. You're an idiot to do that. Because they're lying. Remember that, they are lying. They want you to debate on their turf. The bottom line is, Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton destroyed medicine. That's what happened. And if you want to debate Roe v. Wade, it's like debating a demoniac. There are demoniacs on the street corners. And if you debate them, you'll win. You'll make sense. They won't acknowledge it. But that's what you're doing if you debate Roe v. Wade. The purpose of Roe and Doe, this is from Blackmun himself, was to give medical doctors the right to do whatever they want, even if it's killing another human being. People don't understand that's the real significance, and we're living now in that culture 50 years on. Full bore doctors killing. Why should Dr. Fauci care anything about what he's done? He's a doctor now. Doctors are free to do what they want, according to Doe v. Bolton. You need to protect your life. It's an economic argument they're going to use to kill you and your relatives. They're going to use economics. It's better off. It's compassionate. If you're not prepared, you're going to lose. That's where we're at right now in our society. So thank you, and if there's time later, we'll answer more questions.
If you have questions for Brian, you can talk to him afterwards. Unfortunately, we only have an hour's time, so we really need to move on to our next speaker. But before I introduce the speaker, I wanted to